Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Special guest is Candi Spitz. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
And you're the executive director of Autism Speaks.
I am.
So let's talk about, first of all, a little bit about you, and then we're going to get on to autism. So tell us some background.
So I'm the executive director of Autism Speaks Florida. I've been involved with the organization now for a little over 16 years. And that came about, I'm a mom of twins who have autism. Brendan and Jaden are turning 18 in 2 years. And Autism Speaks, honestly, in the founding days, we're entering our 20th anniversary of the organization. But back when it was still like a very new grassroots organization, I was just so impressed living in New York when I was going through this turmoil, as I'm sure you've heard from other parents when they're going through the diagnosis of fighting to get the diagnosis, not knowing where to go, completely confused that your life has been turned upside down. You have no guidance. And I wrote an email in the middle of the night to Autism Speaks back in 2009 of just basically help. I think my kids have autism. Here's who our family is. Like somebody, like just reach out to me. And the next morning, even though this was Bob and the late Suzanne Wright, the head of NBC Universal, the level of involvement they had on a national level, they emailed me the next morning basically and held my hand through a move from New York, through a diagnosis, down to South Florida. It was really that personal attention, even from the national level, that kind of like lured me into Autism Speaks. And it's also why I'm back as the executive director, that we are here in the community helping people, every day, holding your hand through your diagnosis, through those life changes.
So when parents and family become aware, it's sort of like a death of the things that you thought were going to happen. All of a sudden, it's going to be different.
It is.
Tell us about that process.
So for a lot of us, because autism, and it's not the same for everyone. It is a spectrum. And what we face during this diagnosis, some children are born delayed. Some children, like mine, was very radical. Now, looking back, I'm thankful for what I went through. But to kind of set the tone, my kids were huge child and TV movie stars. You could watch them, talking, walking, playing, eating, doing everything that babies do up until 17 and a half months. At 17 and a half months, over a period of 2 weeks, while they're in the middle of filming a movie, everything is documented. They lost every single skill that they had. They stopped walking, they stopped talking, playing, eye contact. By the end of the 2 weeks, they couldn't physically hold themselves up and they were completely blank. So kids who were like loving, emotional, were just...
What was it like for you and their father?
It was awful. So, honestly, I actually don't even have a photograph from that time period because I couldn't look at the blank stares. And it's awful to say that, but it was, the not knowing was the worst part because you can't get an answer. And especially this was 2009. We were in New York at the time and the legal diagnosis for doctors was 2 years old. So all they could tell us was maybe your kids are speech delayed. And as a parent, it was fighting words because it was like, come on, 2 weeks ago, my kids had a full-blown conversation with you. Like, what has happened? Where is this going?
Does that happen frequently where it's like all of a sudden?
It's regression, yes. So around age 2, and that's why a lot of families, and we don't get into the conversations of vaccines or what causes things, but that's why a lot of families seem to lean towards that, even though that's not the facts, But around age 2 is when a lot of children regress. For me, I'm thankful it happened so quickly. We didn't have a delay. They were so far advanced and lost everything because as a parent, it's fighting words. I'm going, something is different in my kids and I need to find what I can do to fix it.
Candi, when you first saw the first symptom, what were you thinking?
I didn't recognize the first symptom. Every day for 2 weeks, like the first day, it was like little things. They were eating stage 3 Gerber baby food and pulling the chunks out of their mouth. The next time it was in the middle of, we're filming, so you're taping like 8 hours a day. And the director's going like, Candi, they're not paying attention. Like for the last 9 months, we've been working with them. They've done great. Like what is going on? And there was an excuse for everything. I'm going, they were advanced. Maybe it's the terrible twos coming on early. They're babies. Maybe they don't want to work. There's a reasoning and you start justifying. It wasn't until like the blank stares that I really started getting concerned because my kids, I used to like love and hug and kiss and squeeze on them. They didn't want to be touched. All of a sudden, it was like this isolated, they wanted to be left alone. They didn't want you near them. It was just not, it wasn't my babies. It was like the life was sucked out of them. But that was kind of like the driving factor of me being able to call the pediatrician and say, something's wrong.
So lots of folks think it's only over there, but the impact on the family is significant. Yeah. So what was like when you're talking with your husband and going, what is going on with him? What were you feeling then?
So that's the hardest part. And this, I don't have the exact number, it's a 90-something percentage of families who end up in divorce when you're dealing with a special needs child. This is hard. Typically, there is one parent. I'm divorced. I've been divorced for 10 years, and I'm a completely single parent. He is not involved with their lives at all. Typically, you have one parent who is fighting because you hold on to hope. And for me, right at the diagnosis, Autism Speaks was that hope for me of there are things I can do. There are things that I can do to try to help my kids be the best that they can be. Maybe I can't cure this, but one parent seems to give up their life, and this is just typical, but one parent continues on either ignoring the fact that this is going on or can't process what is going on or has her own way of internalizing it. But a lot of families like mine, and I'm very open with that, I finally hit a point of I don't want a third child, in this. I mean, you're now acting as the other child. I need someone who's going to fight just as hard to get them every therapy, to show them the love that they need, give them the attention, give them the experiences.
So there you were experiencing that. So today, when you look back and you say, there are plenty of parents that are about to go through that or are going through that.
Yeah.
So do you share your story with them? Should they ask?
Yeah, I'm very open about all of our challenges for that exact reason. There are things that we can do even during the diagnosis portion, that there are tools even professionally that Autism Speaks can give you. We have a 100-day toolkit when you go through a diagnosis that kind of walks you through what to do for that first 100 days. When I went through the diagnosis, that didn't exist. So basically, when the doctor finally at age 2 could say, yes, like on the prescription pad, your child has autism, I was handed a book. Same thing happened in New York that I was handed here. That was about this thick.
Good luck, ma'am.
Yeah, but it was all it was here's every resource provider in your area. And so I live in Palm Beach County. I was given a book that said like Christina, speech pathologist, Boca Raton phone number. And I'm like, I'm supposed to pick this because I like your name and what city you live in? Like where do you go? There's no help. So now there are tools in place, whether you're looking at Autism Speaks, you're looking at CARD, you have all of these great resources who can walk you through and kind of alleviate some of that stress and pressures. There are social groups, there's parent groups, we are a tight-knit special needs village across the United States. I don't have to know you for you to be like my best friend. If we connect on social media, we are there cheering on your child took a bite of a new food. You will see every parent that is in the bubble. Like, that is incredible. It's a huge milestone. We celebrate every win together.
So Miami-Dade County Commissioner Raquel Regalado is here, and who has, I believe she has 2 autistic adult children. She said they deserve a seat at the table.
Yep.
And that sticks with me.
Yeah.
And it was sort of our drive during the month of April, which was Autism Awareness Month. And so we like to spread that gospel. And so here you are now helping the parents and helping the children. So tell us the services that Autism Speaks.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the commissioner, because she's actually part of the event that I was telling you. What I was most proud of, and the reason I actually came back to Autism Speaks now and joined as their executive director, is the focus really is on this transition to adulthood. People forget that our kids grow up. Like, it's fantastic that we have all these great services for when you're a baby and you're going through all of this and the diagnosis. That is crucial. There's also a lot of community partners that do help then. But my kids are turning 18 in 3 weeks. This is a very scary time period as you're trying to justify a quote unquote graduation when you're deferring the diploma. It's a special needs diploma, an access diploma. You're deferring it so the kids are not taking the diploma so they can stay in the school district until 22, figuring out job placement, post-secondary options, figuring out guardianship. We have to take legal guardianship of our kids at 18, even though you are the parent. There is a whole process and an expensive process to go through to make sure that your kids have a voice if they can't speak for themselves, medically, education, decision makers. There's stressors that are coming on right now, and I'm going through all of it, that families aren't prepared for. And Autism Speaks is that voice right now. Our focus is on that transition to adulthood. There currently is not housing. Like, what happens? I'm turning 50 years old. I am worried about the future, what happens when I'm gone, who's going to care for my kids, where are they going to live? There isn't the area, the United States is not prepared, and let alone Florida, housing, post-secondary, workforce. We talked a little of workforce.
Some parents may not be aware of it, but if you're a foster child at age 18 or so, you age out.
Right.
And what happens to those kids in
Right.
the sense, if they're not trained
Right.
for what to do,
Yeah.
there's a problem.
Yeah.
So here you are trying to help the system of helping the parents and yourself. What's going to happen when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23?
That's what we're working for now. And that's why we have, we are doing an event next week here in Miami, which is one of the reasons we wanted to come on and really promote. It is on that transition to adulthood. We are pulling together all of our community partners. This is not just Autism Speaks preaching to you of what you should do as they age out. We have CARD coming in. We have Commissioner coming in.
Tell people what CARD is.
So the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. We're also bringing in Dan Marino Foundation. We have safety panelists. We have safety. We have tourism, adapting our tourism and travel and hospitality for the needs of those on the spectrum. We have, as I said, hospitality. We have travel. Goodness, I'm drawing a blank right now on everything that we have for this event. But it's everything that you need for that transition to adulthood. All the services are going to be in one room next Friday at Lowe's Miami Beach. And I can give you the link if you want to share some information. There is a $50 charge per person. However, I do have some sponsored seats. So if you know anybody who wants to come to our event, please feel free to reach out to me.
So in the 70s and 80s, I
Yes.
heard, Dan Marino does he have an autistic child?
Yes.
It was like, that was the extent that most people knew. Because as we were growing up, there was not the awareness that there is today.
Mm-hmm.
There would be some kids that had, I don't want to use the wrong term, Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And you could look at them and go, there's a problem, all right? And so that was easy to spot.
Right.
But most of us sort of stayed away from it, like it was contagious.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the siblings of autistic children. What is that like for them?
Well, listen, you were spot on in saying that autism is a little bit harder because there's no physical characteristics. So a lot of times you don't realize that someone is on the spectrum, and the spectrum is so varied. So in the older days, it was harder to recognize or diagnose. You might have thought this was a problem child. And so maybe the sibling was trying to justify, this is the bad kid and this is the good kid, when that wasn't the case. People just didn't understand. The beauty now is parents are understanding and learning early on. Doctors are aware, so they're noticing. A lot of times it could be a sensory concern. These bright lights, for me, even looking at you, these are bright. For someone on the spectrum, the lights might be a trigger. They're hearing the air conditioner and they can't focus on you because all they can hear is the air conditioner. There's a ticking sound. It could be the seat's uncomfortable. When you fix whatever that one problem is that might be the concern, they are focused. They are the best employees, as we were talking earlier about. They are the best students. There's a different way of doing things. So you just have to get to the root of what the problem is that's making them overwhelmed, and then they can focus on it.
There's a show, Love on the Spectrum. Yes. I've watched it like crazy. And some are a little more affected and some a little less. And when you talk and when you watch them and you see how they're getting along, and there is that common thing, there's a desire to be connected. Some of them can do it. Some are like great at it, and others are like not. And you see the openness. There's seems to be a lot less of filter when they speak.
Well, if you're watching this season, so Tyler White and Madison, who are on the show currently, Tyler is our official Autism Speaks Florida DJ for every event. And
really?
he will be here next week, here for our Summit and Challenge event. He's our DJ.
Where's that appearing, the show?
That's this whole season. So
but on what channel?
It's on Netflix. It's on Netflix. Yeah. So Tyler White and Madison, and he openly shares on there that was what brought them together as a couple, was their love for Autism Speaks walks brought them together. They are the cutest couple. He DJs for every one of our events, but he will be here next Saturday, May 17th at our oh my gosh, I'm like losing my mind today when it comes to talking. He will be doing our Summit and Challenge event, and he's our DJ.
Let's talk for a second on the stress on the family unit when there's one or more, and you have a lot of personal experience with that. How did your life change, and how is it now, and how you look at it?
So I'm actually very open with this because people don't realize the financial strains that go on the family, the regular strains. I went from a very high profile life where we didn't have a care in the world to having nothing. Like literally having nothing. That wasn't just from a divorce. And when you first go through this diagnosis, you will do anything and everything to find a way to help your child. And unfortunately, there's a lot of services who are paid services that may not necessarily offer help, but they piggyback on the fact that these are parents who are so stressed out and will do anything for their child. So they'll sell you just about anything, and you're going to fall for it. I want to save the world. I want to save my children. We put everything into our children. We went from massive houses to a tiny little home to now I live in a little apartment. We went from, cars, things, whatever else, to living simply just to make ends meet. The medical bills alone, my therapy bills, most of this is not covered by insurance. Most is not covered by any type of government resource because basically if you have a job, you make too much money for any kind of assistance. So we're all on our own just fighting to do what it takes for our kids, doing whatever makes them happy. For my kids, they are very sensory seeking, meaning they need that feel, the rush, the thrill, like rides, excitement, like vibration of concerts, the experiences. So I literally invest every penny I have and my time every single weekend into a Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens experience.
If you had another child that was not on the spectrum, what would be the conversation you would have with that child about what's going on?
Well, that's actually really hard, and that's what's hard for our siblings. And I did have an ex that had 2 children that we raised together for 8 years. It's hard on the siblings because our kids with special needs have certain needs, certain schedules, et cetera. So for my kids, every single weekend having to be at a theme park. If you have other siblings, they have friends, they have sports, they have things that they want to do. And it's a hard balance as a parent to say, which is more important? Do I give my time to you and, and your local needs here with your friends and your sports and your things? Do I do it to your sibling who wants to be in Orlando every weekend? So justifying who gets more attention, no parent wants to do that. There's no such thing as who gets more love, who gets more. So it's hard on our siblings. And when there's an age difference, it's a little bit easier. So when there's an age difference, they can understand like why Brendan might need this and you're not getting this. But typically all kids are all within, 2 to 3 years apart. It's really hard. It's hard.
A couple of weeks ago, I was over at the Friendship Circle, 87th Avenue, 112th Street, and it happened to be a Sunday, and there were kids that were there. And I saw the parents dropping off the kids and then picking them up. And they were it wasn't basketball, but something with some balls and watching the interaction there and seeing the levels of the kids. Yeah. One was like always holding on, and another one's give me the ball. What relief can the parents get so they can get recentered? What should they do?
Well, every child is different. So I said that's the hardest part in all of this. Most of my kids go to a special needs school, and they've grown up with the same kids for the last 16 years. And we are all at different levels of functioning, whether it be in school, in the environment, how we interact. So again, it's kind of up to that child's needs and how much exposure they've had to things. For my kids, it really has been, I've thrown them into everything since they were 2. Every day that we're not in school, we have an activity, a program, things like that. When they were younger, it was easier to adapt to whatever the stimulus was. When, you would go to a Disney 15 minutes in, they are overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're having a meltdown, they're face first, and they're little, and you can scoop them up and you can leave and say, we'll try again. When they're now turning 18 and they're bigger than I am, I can't do that.
So we each have our own cross to bear. Mm-hmm. When my son was about this big, I started recognizing that he couldn't catch a football, he couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. So we take him to the ophthalmologist, and then in the testing realized that his eyes were different, needed glasses, and he was colorblind. I cried like a baby for that simple little thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, at that moment, it was overwhelming. It was, why isn't he just perfect? Right. Why did this happen? So what are some of the emotions that parents go through? It's like, why did this happen to me?
Oh, I went through all of that because here I was, I did not have the best childhood myself. So when I knew I was going to be a parent, I did everything to make sure that I was the perfect parent and my kids were going to have the perfect life, from a great pregnancy. I was blessed with 2 very healthy, very big and strong babies,
Even though you're 5'2".
Oh my God.
5'2",
yeah,
folks.
I'm 5'2". I was 90 pounds when I got pregnant, and they were 8.5 pounds each. They were big, big babies. They lived on bags of spinach and bottled water. It's all they wanted for 9 months. And Jaden came out of the womb and pushed himself up on the table. And the doctor's like, Candi, you can't do that when you're born. And I'm like, tell it 9 months of spinach. What do you want me to tell you? But we had this vision of what our kids' future is going to be like. The initial shock, and this is going to be the same for everyone with any diagnosis. This is not just autism. When you think like this perfect world that you crafted in your head of what your life was going to be like is shattered, it's devastating. I thought my world was over. I mean, I repeatedly told my ex-husband, I'm going to stare at these four walls for the rest of my life. 8 to 10 hours a day, I had therapists in my home. I didn't see a human being. I felt like, I showered and I took care of kids and I slept, and that's all I did. It's not the reality. Once you gain that hope, and I see this with a lot of our families, once you realize there are things that we can do, therapies that we can do, experiences they can do, tools in place to help our children be the best that they can be, and we realize it's not comparing you to me, like who is going to be more successful. How can I make my child be the best version of themselves and provide for them? Your perspective on all of this changes. I look at my kids right now, and I've been around a lot of typical children as well. Some people don't like when I say this. I feel blessed that my kids have autism. My kids see the world in a way that I don't see the world. They see goodness in every single human being. I've seen them, they've witnessed some bad things in life, and they will look at the person as if they have a heart of gold because they see their heart. They only see, black and white. They don't see these gray areas. They don't see lies. They don't,
And that comes up, by the way, on the show, Love on the Spectrum. It's just like, wow.
Right.
Right? Yes. Very open.
Right. It is. It's almost like this perfect, if you want an honest answer on anything in life, ask a child with autism or a young adult with autism, because they're going to give you a very, you might not want to hear the answer, but it's brutal reality. And when you get to those moments, my children were nonverbal for most of their life, and they're even now turning 18. They are verbal, but they're not conversational. You can ask them very simple questions, but that moment that they were able to say "I love you" is a moment like that will be etched in my mind for the rest of my life, because sometimes we forget in the stress of all of this. I'm going to cry saying it, because from the moment that my children were born and through the diagnosis, I never stopped talking to them as if they could understand and answer me and everything. I never let that change. And it was actually my breaking point and why I went through a divorce, because he didn't. But at one moment, they were 7 years old. I did the same routine every night at bedtime, and I would lean down and give 3 kisses and say, "Good night, sweet dreams, mommy loves you." Never had an answer. And that particular night, I leaned down to Brendan. I have twin boys. Leaned down to Brendan and said, "Good night," and gave the first kiss. And he looked up and said, "Sweet dreams, mommy loves you." I lost it. I completely lost it. And I'll still, that's 11 years later, I will still cry over it, because it was in that moment that I realized, just like I had always said, just because they can't at this point in time verbalize or type on their iPad or whatever to communicate it, every single thing I was saying was going into them and shaping their future. And it was actually in that moment that I looked at my ex-husband and told him I officially wanted the divorce, because he never it wasn't treating them as human beings. They are people. Even if they can't communicate, they are communicating, whether it's through verbal, through their eyes, through actions, through typing on keyboards. Our children are brilliant. They understand things that we don't see. They understand our emotions. I purposely will try. They will never see me upset, because I don't want them to feel that stress or anxiety. I try to shelter in some ways, which is not necessarily a good thing. But our kids feel things at a level that we don't feel. They sense things in the world that we don't sense. They can see patterns in things that we don't see, and it's the future. I mean, that's the future. It's 1 in 31 children right now are on the new autism prevalence. At the rate we're going, we are going to have a world that we all want. We want a cure. Everybody wants that. And there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a cure.
So in public schools, that would essentially mean every class, there's at least one.
Oh, of course.
That
yes.
doesn't include the other related disabilities
Correct.
that are there, which I hear is a tremendous number. So people can find out more about Autism Speaks by autismspeaks.org.
Correct.
And go on the website, see the different services. There's contact phone numbers, and they can speak to somebody.
Yeah, and the most important number, anyone, if you're going through a diagnosis, you have questions about this, we have a line called the ART program, the Autism Response Team. It is 1-888-AUTISM-2. That number is just like a crisis line. When you call in, it goes by your area code. It's going to get you services right here in Miami-Dade. If you are in Broward, it's going to get you services in Broward. Any question you need from a doctor, resource therapist, et cetera.
And people want an answer. They want it sooner than later, because you always hate it when you go to the doctor and you get blood, and 3 weeks later they say, well, we'll let you know. Come on in a week or so.
Yeah.
And so, again, you're really great.
Thank you.
Congratulations for devoting your life to making other families better.
Thank you.
Right? We're going to invite you back.
Thank you.
Candi, thank you so much. And we're going to sign off. But before we do that, I'd like you to look at this blue camera. If we get, what I'd like you to do is talk about some mentors that you have or had. And if they passed, you want to mention them by name, that would be wonderful. Okay? Right there.
You're going to make me cry. Going through this autism spectrum process has been a whirlwind. And honestly, the late Suzanne Wright, the founder of Autism Speaks, was my mentor. She is the one who took me under her wing and held my hand through this diagnosis, through the moves. She was the one who always awarded me the opportunities to share my story, so parents were able to better help their children and have that firsthand experience. Even as a founder of a multi-million-dollar organization and the wife of NBC Universal Bob Wright, she would be sitting in the dirt next to the stroller, babysitting my kids so I could be at the podium sharing our mission and sharing the story. She will always be my mentor. She is the reason I am here with Autism Speaks now and the reason I fight so hard for our families.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
We're going to look in the red camera and we're going to say, folks, thank you for joining us. Remember, take care of yourselves and your family.